We're going to go ahead and get started in a minute or two. I want to thank everyone for joining us and remind you that language interpretation is available in Bangla, Urdu, and Spanish. If you want to hear the stream in Bangla, you have to select German. If you want to hear the stream in Urdu, you have to select French. But if you want to hear it in Spanish, you get to select Spanish. And that's because of the limitations that are provided by Zoom. If you can't hear us clearly, please just post it in the chat so that we know and we can try to address it.
Hi, I'm so sorry. I am like trying to manage multiple. I just hopped off of a quick call. Thank you, Mr. Schneider, for bringing us all together.
You're very welcome. Let me do some introductions, and then I will hand it over to you and Ms. Skop and Ms. Watts if she shows up for your presentation, and then some questions. For those who don't know me, I am Doug Schneider. I am the Democratic District Leader here in the 44th Assembly District. And more importantly, I am the father of two wonderful children. My son is a rising first grader at PS 107, and my daughter starts preschool this fall. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and especially thank our panelists from the DOE for being here tonight. And just to let everybody know that the forum is being recorded. Remote learning is neither theoretical nor hypothetical for me. Like so many of you, I lived remote learning. I had to figure out how to teach my son while keeping my daughter away from him and occupied. I had to make it look like I knew what I was doing while secretly desperate for his teachers to send his next assignment. I had to learn what a number bond was for my kindergartner so I could turn around and teach him about number bonds. All the while, I had to provide for my kids' emotional needs while planning meals and trying to fit in an hour or two of work wherever I could. If I learned one thing from this experience, it is that remote learning is not and cannot be a long-term substitute for full-time in-person learning. Being in school is essential to the social and emotional development of our children. In addition to the negative academic ramifications, lack of in-person learning exacerbates food insecurity and the structural inequality that exists in our schools and communities. It is well documented that the lack of full-time in-person learning is simply harmful to our children. At the same time, the COVID-19 crisis is not going to go away anytime soon, and we need to balance the need for in-person schooling with the obligation to provide a safe learning environment for students, teachers, staff, and families. This is a difficult task, and there are no easy answers. I was just appointed to serve on the reopening committee of my daughter's preschool, so I too am grappling with these questions every day. Our teachers were thrown into an impossible situation in March and were heroes helping students and parents survive remote learning. If you didn't know how hard their job was before, you sure do now. We owe it to them to ensure their safety when they enter the school building. And until it is safe to fully reopen schools, the DOE must develop a remote learning plan that meets the social, emotional, and academic needs of all students. We cannot do any of this without meaningful input from students, parents, and especially teachers and staff. We need to know what our teachers, students, and parents require to feel safe when they are in school and feel confident that students are getting what they need from remote learning. So far, all we have is a remote learning plan that creates more questions than answers. Luckily, we have some very important folks here tonight to help us answer these questions. After a brief presentation, the majority of this forum is going to be dedicated to getting answers to your questions. Some of you already submitted questions, but you can also propose new questions during the forum using the Q&A feature. I am pleased to be joined tonight by Deputy Chancellor Adrienne Austin, District 15 Superintendent Anita Skop, and Executive Superintendent Karen Watts. Adrienne Austin is the Acting Deputy Chancellor for Community Empowerment, Partnerships, and Communications. This division includes the offices of Family and Community Empowerment and Translation and Interpretation Services. She leads the DOE's work to empower families and communities. She previously served as the division's Chief Operating Officer, and before joining the division, served in the DOE's Office of General Counsel. Deputy Chancellor Austin, thank you for being here tonight. Many of you probably already know Anita Skop, who has served as the Community Superintendent for District 15 in Brooklyn for nearly 11 years. Ms. Skop has worked in a wide range of educational settings, having held teaching support and leadership positions in early childhood, elementary, and middle school education programs. She was the New York State Teacher of the Year for 1994 and has received the Reliance Award for Excellence in Education and the NYC ASCD Distinguished Educator Award. Ms. Skop, thank you for joining us. Karen Watts is currently the Executive Superintendent of the Brooklyn North DOE Borough Office, which includes Districts 13, 14, 15, 16, 19, 23, and 32, and the high schools within those districts. She was formerly the Brooklyn North High School Superintendent and has served as an executive principal, assistant principal, and science teacher during her career in the New York City DOE. Ms. Watts, we appreciate you joining us tonight, and I am now going to hand things over to Deputy Chancellor Adrienne Austin.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schneider, for just pulling us all together. I'm really excited to be able to have this space with parents, with families, with communities. I see a lot of parent leaders here. Super happy to see familiar faces. I haven't seen you guys in a while, so it just brings me some amount of joy to be able to just share space with you all. There just were a number of things, Douglas, that I heard you say and that I related to. You said you experienced in remote learning this feeling of needing to look like you knew what you were doing. I think we all as parents relate to that. That's a lot of what parenting is sort of experiencing new things, new challenges, and instilling confidence in our kids and pretending like we know what we're doing when we have no idea sometimes, but we're doing the best that we can. And certainly in this environment where we are all learning new things, certainly in DOE, our teachers have learned new ways of working. All of us across DOE have learned new ways of working and are sort of plowing through this environment where it's a dynamic, environment every day. There's something new. We look at what's happening across the country with coronavirus, and we're seeing still it's, surges across the country and the numbers increasing, and trying to be as responsible as possible in planning in an environment where there's so much uncertainty. So that's how we're approaching it. I'm really excited to be able to share what we know and provide what answers I can to parents, and want to just set expectations and by saying there's a lot that we still don't have resolved. There's a lot of policies that we expect that will be rolled out within the next few weeks, and want to give you some confidence that your voices will be heard in this process, and we are setting up a policy development process that bakes in parent involvement, parent voice. And so the way that I'm thinking about it and the way that we've been thinking about it from a central perspective is that, there's going to be these central wide policies that are implemented and announced, but a lot of the actual day-to-day routines and policies that govern what happened in a school are going to be made by principals. And so we have provided a toolkit to principals to sort of give a framework on what parent engagement on the school side looks like. We certainly are, from a central perspective, going to have moments. We had one last week where there was a family and student information session where we're coming out to you all and saying, like, here's what's happening from a central perspective. We have another one, please save the date, July 28th. From 6:30 to 7:30, which will be another opportunity, and we will continue to have those engagements, but also just want to give you confidence that a lot of the decisions that are going to be made across the summer, the next couple of months, will be made at the school site, because our schools are so different, and that is how a lot of the decisions are going to be made, and they'll be made in close consultation with parents. So with that, I think what I'd like to do is to go through just the program models that were announced. Doug, I don't know if you have the ability to—
Yeah, I'll bring those up in a second.
And so as a part of our planning process, the reopening team incorporated parent and student feedback into these program models, which are the implementation of blended learning across our school system. And so in our family and student survey on reopening, we heard from over 450,000 parents and over 100,000 students. And roughly 50% of the responses that we received indicated a preference for alternating days, which is the basis of the models that we're going to see shortly in this PowerPoint. We've set a floor, but not a ceiling, and we expect that the schools are going to be able to serve at least 1/3 of their students at any given time. Many are going to be able to do more, and so that's what's contemplated by these program models. We are working with the city. We're working with other city agencies. We had an announcement from the mayor last week to talk about the capacity to serve students in for childcare, and we're trying to increase our ability to provide childcare options. We know that we have a lot of working parents, and we're certainly looking to find ways to support our working parents across the city. I can go into these models, but I tell you now, if we don't have the pictures, it's really difficult because
it's coming in 1 second.
Okay. I feel like we're at an extreme disadvantage if you guys can't see. Here we go. What these models look like. And I think for me, the pictures, I'm a visual learner, and so the pictures help to tell the story. So this is super helpful. If we can, the key tenets of the plan, families are going to be able to opt out of in-person instruction. That period has already begun. And so parents can go online and indicate if you guys want to opt out of in-person instruction and opt into only remote, that's possible now, and that's going to be open until August 7th. And that's, the first deadline that we've articulated around that. But the purpose of the deadline is so that principals can really do this planning. Principals have to know what students are planning to come back in person, and they need to know staffing and what staffing is going to look like in the fall. And that's going to determine which models are going to work for those school communities. So that's part of the first piece of this planning. Again, for the split models, we are aiming to provide in-person instruction for at least 33% of our students. And depending on how many parents opt out for their children of in-person, we will be able to serve more. And just in terms of space, you all know this, but we are implementing social distancing, and the social distancing means that we're going to have a range of 9 to 12 students per classroom, making sure that we have 6 feet of space between students. And so those are the key tenets of the plan. And now I want to move into the actual program models that principals are going to be looking at. So program model number 1 assumes a minimum of 50% of students returning to in-person instruction. There are going to be many factors that go into whether a principal is going to select this model or any of these models, which the factors are really space. So how much space does the principal have? How much space is available in the school? How many students are registering for all remote? And then staffing. And so this model 1 assumes 50% of students returning in person. Students will receive in person for the same 2 weeks every day. Same 2 days every week and every other Monday. So there are 3 groups in total, and then group D, which you see in gray, is the remote only instruction, which is Monday through Friday. So that's for the parents who opt out of in person. This is available for elementary, middle, and high schools. And so principals of elementary, middle, and high schools will be able to choose from either one of these models, model 1A or 1B. And we can go now to the next, model 2. So model 2 is also available for elementary, middle, and high schools. And that assumes 33% of students will be able to be accommodated with in-person instruction. And so one day will be the same each week, with rotating Mondays and Tuesdays on a 3-week cycle. So for example, cohort 1 consistently comes in Wednesday, 1 Thursday, 1 Friday, and then rotating Monday and Tuesday among the 3 cohorts. Okay, and now moving to model 3. This option is available for middle and high schools only, so not for elementary schools. and it assumes 33% of students will be able to attend school in person. So this 6-day rotation is in person once every 4 days, or in person 2 days out of 6. And part of the reason why we selected this model is because for many high schools, this is a part of their planning already. And so this is a scheduling model that the principals and students would be familiar with. And just to go through an example, one cohort would come in Monday and Tuesday 1 week, then 2 more cycles of 2 days, so that the same cohort comes again the following Tuesday and Wednesday, and then repeating over a course of weeks on a 6-day cycle. And models 4 and 5 are options for District 75 schools only, just recognizing that our students in District 75 have different needs. These are our students who have IEPs, and oftentimes the classroom sizes and the instructional model is different and would allow for a different program model for students. And so if you look at model 4A, you can see group D, this is a remote only group, would be in remote instruction Monday through Friday, but then group A and group B would be in school consecutively Monday through Friday on alternating weeks. So group A all week 1, group B every day of week 2, and then rotating. So every other week, but consecutive days. And then if you look at model 4B, again, the distinction there is with group C. So group C contemplates that school would be able to have a group of students that was able to attend Monday through Friday every week. So just every day of the week, and then groups A and B alternate every other week, but consecutive days. And then moving to model 5, again, this is also available for District 75 schools, which again would have model 5B has the group C, which is consistent Monday through Friday, and would allow for some students within the school to be in consecutive days across the weeks. And then groups A and B would have consistent days, but alternating, if you look at the Mondays, alternating days.
Thank you very much, Ms. Austin. Are you done with the presentation part?
I am done with the presentation
Awesome.
part. I am really lucky to be joined by our superintendent, Anita Scott, who has some really good granular information about some of the survey results we got from District 15. If you would be willing to give her the floor for just a moment to share what we've learned from families.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're happy to have you, Ms. Skop, and look forward to hearing from you.
So thank you very much for inviting me today. I'm delighted to be here and sharing the panel with the people that are so committed to the children of District 15 and in fact to the whole city. So we're very grateful for this opportunity. I'm going to very quickly just talk you through the survey, talk you through the kind of questions that were asked. They were fairly basic, and I'm going to give you some numbers just to give you a sense of what our results were. In many cases, our results were slightly higher than that citywide, and you'll see the difference in a few minutes. So overall, our enrollment is 26,201. And out of the 26,201 students that are considered District 15, we had a response of 10,424, which is 40% of our children and parents responded to this. And you will see that it varied slightly from age group to age group. So for example, in early childhood, pre-K through grade 2, 36% of the community responded. In grades 3 to 5, we had a slightly higher percentage in that 44% of students' families responded. Grades 6 to 8, again, down to 37%, and at the high school level, only 29%. Student responses are significantly lower. So overall, we have in 6 to 12, which were the grade ranges for students to respond, we have a total of 7,180 students, of which 1,427 responded, which is roughly 20%. From the 20%, the 6th to 8th graders, 15% responded. Our 9 to 12th graders, 32% responded. So you could see at the high school level, they responded at a significantly higher number. The questions that were asked covered the comfort in returning to school, the use of health measures, the phased return to school, remote learning, transportation, and childcare needs. The childcare needs were only asked of families and of course not of students. So for an example, a family question was asked, how comfortable are you sending your child to a school building every day this fall if recommended health safety measures such as social distancing are in place? The students were asked, how comfortable are you going to in-person school every day this fall if there are health and safety measures like social distancing? So you can see how slightly nuanced, but basically asking the same question was put forward to both families and then to students. So in District 15, the answer to that question, if we continue learning at home in the fall, do you anticipate needing childcare during the week when your child is not attending school? In this, we were higher than the city. 43% of family respondents said yes, as opposed to the citywide response of 35%. 37% said no, as opposed to the citywide response of 48%, which is interesting because it almost flipped. And people who said, I'm not sure, were 20%, whereas in the city it was 17%. How comfortable are you sending your child attending a school building every day this fall if recommended health and safety measures such as social distancing are in place? In District 15, first of all, the choices are very comfortable, mostly comfortable, a little comfortable, and not comfortable at all. So the first category, very comfortable, was 31%, mostly comfortable was 31%, a little comfortable was 22%, and not comfortable at all was 16%. These numbers are slightly different than the city, where in very comfortable it was 25%, mostly comfortable was 35%, a little comfortable was 26%, and not comfortable at all was 14%. Those are what students wrote. The city numbers are 25%, mostly comfortable 31%, a little comfortable 27%, and not comfortable at all 17%. So you can see that we are within a range of the city, but in some cases, parents felt they would want their kids to go back more. Parents wanted childcare more. Okay, how comfortable would your child be wearing a mask to school? Overall, in District 15, very comfortable was 25%, mostly comfortable was 33%, a little comfortable was 26%, not comfortable at all was 15%, and the number that responded statistically to my child is medically unable to wear a mask was actually 0%. Whereas citywide, the averages are slightly lower. For example, very comfortable was only 24%, mostly comfortable was 28%, a little comfortable was the same, 26%, not at all comfortable was 21% at the city, which was higher, and medically unable was 1% at the city level. Students overall in District 15, 17% said they were very comfortable, 32% said they were mostly comfortable, 29% said they were a little comfortable, and 22% said they were not comfortable at all. These numbers very much parallel the city, not exactly, but very close. 19% in the city said very comfortable, 29% said mostly comfortable, 29% said a little comfortable, and 23% said not comfortable at all. When we talked about the choices, and this is probably what you're most interested in, the options for families, families were asked the following question. Sending your child to in-person school on certain days like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday. On the days that your child is not in school, he or she would be learning at home. Sending your child to school in person 1 week or on and then learning at home the next week, which is the 1 week on, 1 week off model. What was interesting was in District 15, overarchingly, parents put their first choice, 59% was alternating days. Citywide, that choice was 53%, so you can see how this aligns to the chancellor's protocols that were chosen.
Ms. Skop, is it possible that we can move on to the question and answer? We had over
absolutely.
70 questions presented.
Would be boring, and I apologize, but I wanted to make clear that what had happened was aligned to what parents in District 15 were saying.
We really appreciate that, and we appreciate Deputy Chancellor your comments. I want to remind our panelists when they're answering questions, if they can just slow down and have a few pauses while they're talking to give our interpreters a chance to do their job. We have a number of questions that we're going to ask, and we've broken them down into 5 different topics, so to speak. The first is about the decision-making process. And the first question is the DOE putting together a plan to fully open school at any time this year should the plan arise should the opportunity arise to safely do so? And if not, is the DOE putting together a plan to fully open in the 21-22 school year if the COVID crisis is still ongoing?
Yeah, so we are currently really focusing on doing something that's brand new to us, which is reopening in a blended model. And so that is 100% of our focus, is making sure that our staff is ready, to making sure that we have the health and safety protocols in place, to make sure that we have the PPE that we need to supply to students and to staff members at schools, to make sure that we have the electrostatic sprayers and our custodians are on board and ready to make sure our school buildings are clean, and we have a protocol for making sure that those school buildings remain clean and are cleaned on a daily basis. So we are like laser focused on making sure that we're ready for September, which is quickly approaching, and there are a lot of decision points that need to be made up to that point. And I understand the desire to think through and like, well, what's going to happen in 21-22 school year? I've been here for about 10 years. We know how to reopen schools in a non-COVID environment. So I'm really hopeful, like all of us, that there'll be that when we approach that next school year, that we're in a position to say, we can go back to our traditional model of opening and return to business as usual, which we are very familiar with doing and know how to do. But what we're really focused on now is doing something that's brand new to the system, which is thinking through a blended model of learning, which is remote learning, and making sure that our teachers have a different fluency in remote learning than we did when we immediately sort of went into remote learning in the spring, and then making sure that our systems are set up for success for in-person learning and for safety in in-person learning for the fall. And that's got to be 100% of the focus, because even though it feels like there's plenty of time, there's actually hardly any time for a system as large as ours to be able to do that. So with that, I'll turn it over. Anita, I don't know if you want to add anything.
You're on mute, Anita.
I just want to reiterate that when we had to go into this environment, we had to go into it at lightning speed. And I want to give kudos to our teachers, our principals, everybody in the school community, our parents, who literally on a dime turned and created this opportunity. But like everything else, when you don't have the time, the luxury of time, you do it as best as you can. And that's what happened with remote learning initially. It was not as consistent as we would have liked it. It was not as prepared for as we would have liked it. We had people who had never done this kind of work now doing remote learning, and we had people who were amazing. I would say our teachers in many, 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 many cases rose to the occasion. We now have the time, and we are working to train our teachers, whether they are doing in-person learning or remote learning, to understand how remote learning works, really well and how to use this. I am a big believer that remote learning is the actual 21st century, not because kids shouldn't be in school. I believe kids should be in school. I think that kids benefit from being in school. But I also think about how can we make this happen in a way that enables teachers to give a lot of individualized attention without the class sitting there. So things like office hours, things like appointments, things like project-based learning. These are the things that you're going to see in remote learning that we are training our teachers to do.
Thank you. I'm gonna just push a little bit further on this question, because I have no doubt that the DOE knows how to open the school in a non-COVID environment, but what about opening school next year in a COVID environment? We cannot keep remote learning as a permanent model until we find a vaccine. And so we have, if we're not going to open school at any time during this school year, we have a year now to plan to open schools for the next school year if the situation in terms of COVID is no different in a year than it is today. And so my question is, when is the DOE going to start planning to reopen schools for next year in a COVID environment, not a non-COVID environment?
Yeah, so a lot of what our constraints are and what informs our planning at this stage is sort of the executive orders that are in place on the state level. And so we have an executive order that sort of gives us the parameters around how we're developing our plan. So our social distancing that we're implementing, we're doing that because our health officials from the state, from the feds, and then locally are telling us, okay, here are the health parameters, here's how you make sure that you are thinking about reopening and bringing people together in a safe way, here's your parameters, and we're working within that to design a plan. As that changes, as the state issues different guidance, as the health medical professionals have, you know, a different knowledge set, a different context for us to be able to plan in, we will certainly engage in that. I understand there's like a desire for us to, you know, sort of project ourselves into, you know, 365 days from now and see where we are. But I will tell you this, I mean, we're learning new things about the virus all of the time. When we first entered into this remote learning environment, I think the first medical advice that we got was the need for masks. People ought not wear masks. It's going to be fine. And that's what the medical experts knew at the time. And then, you know, as we progressed, we've learned more. When we first entered into the COVID environment, we were told that, you know, from the medical experts, because they didn't know it's a novel virus, it's a new virus, that, you know, this virus has no impact whatsoever on children. And then we learned, oh, well, there is a, you know, a pediatric inflammatory aspect of this virus. And so I just want to sort of, you know, I know there's a desire for certainty. We want to be able to have a crystal ball and be able to project ourselves into the future and know exactly how we're going to respond. But I think what keeps us grounded and keeps us responsible in our decision making is really focusing on what the known parameters are, what the experts are saying to give us guidance on how to plan, and then developing plans within that context, and then focusing on making sure we implement, because we can create the grandest of plans and guidance from a central level, but it's going to be critical that our staff is prepared to execute and implement.
So let me follow up in terms of you referenced kind of what the parameters were, what the experts are telling us. When the decision was made to offer childcare services on remote learning days, did the DOE assess whether it actually reduced the risk of spread compared to full-time in-person learning? And if so, how did they do that assessment, and what was the conclusion?
I'm sorry, can you, I need that one more time.
Sure, I mean, in essence, the question is, in terms of risk, in terms of the risk of spread, in terms of the danger to the community, was anything done to assess whether or not remote learning with childcare in cohorts on days where you were not in school was actually a lower risk than being in school? And if so, how was that risk assessed, and what was the conclusion there?
Got it. Thank you. So I can tell you that we are working literally in communication with the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene on a daily basis, that all of our planning teams, particularly around reopening, are in constant contact with the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene and the test and trace teams. And so, you know, I know that they're in constant contact. I know that that's incredibly important in terms of developing the plans. And that's as much as I can sort of say without bringing actually the mayor's team in to talk about how they develop that plan, because it's certainly, we're excited about it. We think that it's important for working families to be able to have childcare. We know that there are a lot of essential workers across the city, and we want to make sure that our essential workers have childcare so that they can perform their duties, as well as the working poor across the city. So we're looking forward to hearing more from the city about how to support our families, and are happy that we've gotten this first step articulated around childcare.
I appreciate that. Thank you. How does the DOE plan account for the significant academic, emotional, and developmental differences between the different age groups? It seems to me that the plan is the same for high schoolers as it is for kindergartners in terms of schedule. So how does the plan account for what we all know exists in terms of differences between, you know, high schoolers and kindergartners?
Yeah, so the social emotional wellness of our students is a top priority. And I know that there's a lot of planning that's happening across the system to make sure that there are trauma-informed practices implemented both for students and also for staff. We've all experienced some amount of loss in connection, or most of us have, in connection with COVID-19. And so we know it's important to be able to provide support. I'm going to turn it over to our superintendent, Skop, to just sort of weigh in here on what it actually looks like on a granular level.
So as an early childhood teacher, I totally think your question is such a good one, because what we are asking is, how do we tailor make supports for kids that are developmentally appropriate and that are tied to their connection? So the connection that children will have in the classroom and the workings of the classroom, as it would in a brick and mortar setting regularly, will reflect what is developmentally appropriate for that grade level. So one of the things that we have done in District 15 is that we have supported training in ruler for the Center for Emotional Learning at Yale University, and all of our schools have sent teams to be trained in ruler. In addition to that, we have done significant training on restorative circles. And so there is an expectation at the district level that schools will be implementing this and have been implementing this. I know it has not been consistent with some teachers who have not done as much synchronous learning, but the expectation going forward is that the kids will get the support they need. In addition, the school's guidance counselors and social workers are available to every parent. You do not need an IEP to say, I would like my kid to get a little bit of counseling support that is one-to-one and personal. I need to talk to someone. We will find you. We will help you. Our parent coordinators have done a yeoman's job in reaching out to families. I cannot begin to tell you the level of outreach that has been done to families in need in terms of providing things like food, to providing the technology, and more importantly, to providing emotional support, to being a listening ear and a kind heart. And we are working with all of our teachers, all of our schools, to ensure that that continues at a much deeper level. As Adrienne said, we are all families in trauma right now. Whether we acknowledge it or not, whether we say we're fine, we're not fine. On a day-to-day basis, we're not fine. And so we, as your superintendent, we have shared at principals conferences, talking to teachers, talking to SLTs, this concept of what is most important is the whole child and the family, and that they will get the academic supports they need, which I understand are crucial, but the most important supports right now are the social emotional. So for example, a kindergarten class may read a very simple story like the 10 Best Things About Henry, which talks about losing a pet, but also then enables kids to relate if they have had a loss in their family. Whereas at the high school level, you can talk at a deeper and more socially active level about What are the things that could have been done earlier at the federal level to support COVID work, and how do we as a nation go forward from this? So the way we talk to kids and the way we enable them to feel that they are empowered and the way we talk to families is definitely going to be age and grade level appropriate. Because what matters in this is not just that we come out of it with our kids okay academically. It matters that they come out of this whole and feeling loved and supported.
Thank you so much for that really substantive answer. I really appreciate that, especially as the parent of two little ones. That was a very reassuring answer, so I appreciate it. I'm going to move on to questions about safety. The first one is the general threshold that's been established by public health experts to control and suppress the spread of the virus in the community, and the one being used by school districts across the country, is a positive test rate below 5% for at least 2 weeks. The threshold is only reliable when there is widespread testing. So the question is, what criteria is going to be used to determine when it is safe to reopen schools, and if we have to close schools, and who is it that is going to be making the decision in the instance that we have to are forced to close schools?
Very good questions. So there's always the issue of like the school closure, like we experienced in March, and then there's the question of like an individual school closure, and then there's the question of like, what do you do in a classroom if there's one incident that's been a confirmed case? And so our Division of Climate and Wellness is working through all of those questions, and they are planning on announcing a policy, I know, within the next couple of weeks that sort of iterate on and explain what the protocol is going to be. So I just, nothing announced yet, but it's top of mind, and we expect to hear more about the protocol within the next couple of weeks.
Will there be a testing and tracing protocol in place starting on the first day of school?
Yes, there will be.
Great, thank you. That's something that we got a lot of questions about from parents and teachers. Another question that we got many times was about ventilation. Will the DOE be testing ventilation systems? And given the disparity that already exists, where some schools don't have windows that open or air conditioning while others do, how is the DOE going to improve ventilation to make sure that all schools have adequate ventilation systems to deal with the COVID-19 virus?
Yeah, we are in the process of doing inspections and upgrades on ventilation systems across the system. So that work is ongoing and happening now. And so, more to come. And I think it would be great to have someone, who's actually from operations sort of talk more in depth about what that looks like on the ground, but that work is underway.
Great. Obviously that is something that is very important, especially for, our teachers and staff that are going to be in buildings, every day. Another question that we received multiple times was, are school nurses involved in the planning for reopening, and will every school have at least one full-time nurse on premises?
I'm actually going to start because I think that there's really great news in that respect with District 15. So I'm going to start with Anita, and then Anita, you can kick it back to me.
So to my understanding, we already in many schools have a full-time nurse. In some of our schools, they are part-time. It depends on the population. And the chancellor has committed himself to saying that there will be a full-time nurse in every school. So we are hopeful that we will be working with the schools that have part-time service to ensure that there is somebody there every single day, all day.
And we are super grateful. The mayor's office funded 100 new nursing positions for the fall. So that's going to contribute to our ability to make sure that we have a nurse staffed in every school building. That's the goal, is to have a school nurse in every building. And I think we're very close to hitting that in District 15 if we're not already there. So
great, because that was one of the recommendations across the board from public health experts. And then just a last question about safety, which is, how is the DOE's plan going to address the issue of food insecurity on days where students are not in school?
Yes, we're both aware of food insecurity with respect to our students, and obviously we're going to make sure that our students have access to meals. I think the larger issue that we're still thinking through and we'll work with the city on is providing food to New Yorkers. So during the since March, New York City had been providing meals not only to students but to all New York City residents, and we were serving upwards of 500,000 meals a week. And so we are working with the city and looking to think through what kind of supports we're going to be able to provide across the board, because it's obvious we're in the business of making sure that our students have meals and access to lunch and breakfast. But the concern, I think the larger concern is, what about our larger communities, especially in this time where there's been this economic impact on families overall, and people have lost their jobs. And so thinking through that and hoping to find a solution with the city on that.
Great. Really appreciate that. I'm going to move on to both the curriculum and then implementation of the DOE plan, because that's where I think the crux of the uncertainty is, and what parents and teachers are really wanting to hear more about. And so the first question is, will the DOE require teachers to provide a minimum number of hours of live instruction during remote learning days for both the blended option and the full-time remote? And if you're in the full-time remote, will students have the ability to see each other and interact socially?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the synchronous instruction. I know we heard from a lot of families through remote learning in the spring and then towards the end of the school year that there was a desire for more synchronous instruction, that there wasn't enough live instruction and parents wanted to see more, and felt like there was too much work on the part of families and not enough from the DOE side. And so one of the things that we've done over the summer is we embedded within our expectations an expectation that there be live instruction. And so over the summer in remote learning, there's been 65 minutes of live instruction a day. And so we are continuing to sort of learn our lessons, and we're listening to families and getting families' experiences so that we can continually improve our process. Obviously, this is something we are working closely with our labor partners on finding the solution to, and so those conversations are happening. I see our Executive Superintendent, Karen Watts, has joined us. Hey, Karen. And so I will just turn it over to our Executive Superintendent Watts to talk to us a little bit about what the plan is for synchronous instruction in the fall, and what you see the interplay being between the synchronous and asynchronous instruction.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. It will be dependent on, the agreements made with labor as to the amount of synchronous or live instruction our students will be engaged in. So we are awaiting further communication regarding that. But what I know for certain is that there will be more than there was when we went into remote learning during the spring. So,
and if I can please add to that, I want to tell you that I just want to give you an understanding, as I started the session by saying, we did something amazing in that on a dime, in 3 days, we trained teachers to do remote learning, teachers many of whom had never used a computer for learning other than record keeping in their lives. This is an opportunity right now, today, tomorrow, Thursday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, there are full days of instruction for principals that work around the expectations for remote learning. Principals are being trained in high quality blended learning, what remote learning should look like, how do you do synchronous learning, and how do you support your teachers in doing synchronous learning. At the Brooklyn North level, under Karen's leadership, we have had excellent support in District 15 around blended learning and the work of teachers use it through a wonderful lady called Eileen Marks, that is providing literally 3 times a week. There is support for teachers across the board. As Adrienne said, written into summer school expectations was an expectation for synchronous learning, because that was the biggest concern that was heard. I do want to say that there were many teachers who did amazing synchronous learning, both with little ones and with older kids. Schools literally put on theatrical productions synchronously where they had kids doing parts all over. I saw the most incredible lesson that literally made, I had to leave because I was crying, where I watched an ACEs class. ACEs children are low functioning children, and yet the teachers in that class did a synchronous lesson with a read aloud, where they had children who were communicating on communication boards, interacting with each other. So we have the opportunity to do this, and it did happen in District 15. And we are talking to all of our teachers. I have gone to SLT meetings. I have gone to teaching meetings and met with teachers personally to reassure them that this is about doing this to support our kids, because we want to make this happen. And because we want the kids, as you said, Mr. Schneider, that we want our kids to talk to each other and interact with each other. As I started saying earlier, there is an expectation for me as the superintendent that schools will do a lot of project-based learning. And project-based learning, by definition, means that kids work together the way they do at IBM, the way they do at Microsoft, the way they do at Google, where teams may not be in the same room, but they're working together and talking to each other and engaging. And that's what we need our kids to be doing. Not 1950s learning on a computer, but 21st century learning using the computer.
Thank you all for that answer, for your answers. By far, the question we got the most was, will remote learning for the full-time option be taught by teachers from our children's own school or a centralized group of DOE teachers?
Yeah, I've gotten that question a lot as well. So the plan is, as of now, for schools to be able to do this assessment of what is the staffing, what is their staffing, what does their workforce look like in a school, matched up with the students that are coming back to the school, and to be able to create a staffing plan and serve students within the context of their school environment. I think, there's a larger question around staffing. We all know that DOE, citywide, there's a hiring freeze, and we are in a bit of a budget crisis. And so, the questions around, well, how do we make sure that we are serving our students in the best way possible in this context? Like the next assessment after a school comes together and does this sort of formula of, okay, do I have enough staffing to service our students? If the answer is no there, then I think it's going to have to trigger a larger response from Central. But we haven't gotten there yet. We're still in the process of trying to determine whether or not we can meet our school community needs with the staffing that's present. So we're not thinking about it, but the plan has not gotten to that place where we've got a centralized sort of solution to staffing schools.
So I have 2 follow-ups to that. The first being, this is probably the most important criteria, or one of the most important criteria that parents want to know before making their decision whether to opt into the full-time remote option. So when are parents going to know, considering that the process of choosing which model you want your child to be in has already started? So I appreciate that there's a study going on, but we need to know now. So when are we going to know the answer to that question?
Yeah, it's kind of a chicken and egg question, right? We need to understand how many parents are opting into in-person learning, and then match that up with our staffing in order to be able to give that answer of like, okay, this is exactly what things are going to look like. This is the model that the school is choosing. And so we have to have that data up front to be able to make really sound decisions. And I hear you that parents are like, yeah, but I want to know exactly what it looks like before I opt in one way or the other. I think we're going to have to meet somewhere in the middle. And so part of the advising and the guidance that we've given to schools is to bring parents in, to hold meetings, to bring in the SLT, to do parent community meetings very early, like now. We provided a toolkit that gave some samples for agendas and letters, and so that principals can start wrapping their heads around what exactly parents are thinking in their school communities and get that feedback and be able to provide more details about what things are going to look like earlier. So that's the plan, but it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be we don't have a perfect solution because of the context.
How does that apply in the high school context, particularly for screened or SHSAT schools? Is it going to be that those schools are going to end up with their own teachers, whereas other high schools throughout the city may end up with a centralized pool of DOE teachers, and if so, how is that equitable? Yeah,
there's no plan for centralized teachers, but what I'm gonna kick it over to Anita, and then Anita, I think I'll get at. I think that there's I think I have a couple of answers that might help also. So please join.
So, okay. So first of all, the piece that also has to be considered here is the fact that we have teachers who are specifically going to request, based on their age, based on their health concerns, to be remote teachers. And that's going to happen at every school. So there are teachers in the school already who right now will be approved to teach remotely. What I believe you're talking about is if there is a shortage, what happens? So if there is a shortage in a school of staff, pretty much I would imagine the same thing will happen as if there was a shortage where you would require hiring a new teacher or getting a sub. Somebody will come in and work with the children. However, I am a big believer that this is going to balance out, because remote learning has a larger number of kids in the class than kids who are brick and mortar learning. And so consequently, the teacher is able to service a larger number of children. By definition, that enables remote learning teachers to provide greater levels of attention to kids, and it's not an exact balance. So let's say you have X number of teachers who are going to be brick and mortar and Y number of teachers who are going to be remote. The Y number of teachers can service more remote kids than the X number of teachers can service in class. So it is my belief system, especially in District 15, where we have incredibly dedicated teachers, but we do have teachers who have health needs, that it will balance itself out to the greatest degree.
To follow, Ms. Austin, did you want to address it?
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing, because what we have talked about centrally, and our chancellor has said this, we are looking at our borough offices, we are looking at our central offices, at our teaching staff, our folks that are certified teachers. And we have a lot of certified teachers that are a part of the professional development of the school-based staff. They're certified, they're experienced. And so we are starting to have conversations to say, okay, well, we are in a hiring freeze. How can we rethink our staffing so that our staff is shifted? The staff that is capable, qualified, competent to go in and support students directly, how do we make sure that that transition happens where there may be a shortage? So we've started to have that conversation, and that's certainly on the table.
I think a related question for the blended model is, will students have the same teacher during days when they are in school and days when they are remote? And if so, how is the teacher supposed to do both?
Yeah, I don't know if you want to take that, Anita or Karen.
The answer is it depends on how many fall into each category, and we can't really do that because it's a school by school thing. What I will say is this: there are principals who teach classes. There are incredible learning support people who you would kill to get teaching your kids' class, remotely or otherwise. So I think that this vision of we're going to plop a bureaucrat in to teach a class is not really the case. What's happening is that we are going to try and figure out, and we just don't know yet because it's a numbers game, how many kids are going to need what. Part of what happens when the kids are not in class is going to be asynchronous, meaning if you are assigned, you're in class 2 days that week or 3 days that week, then the 2 days that you're not in class, part of that time at the very least, you will be working on a project. And that's okay. Part of that time you may be meeting with a group of kids. Part of that time your teacher may have office hours where you can come in and talk to her. Many of you have gone, when you were in college, had the opportunity where you took a seminar course. And the seminar course really didn't involve you sitting with the teacher teaching a class. It in fact meant that you came in with your research and met with the teacher for half an hour, and that was your meeting with her. So I think all of these pieces are going to come together when the remote learning is done well and when the classroom brick and mortar is done well.
If I understand your answer, Anita, I think you just said that you're going to be teaching classes in the fall.
I'm absolutely ready. I already have done read aloud, so I'm prepared and I can show you.
I watched your read alouds.
Here's Snuffle Bunny to prove it.
What is remote learning gonna look like for pre-literate learners and English language learners?
If I can take that question, I'd be happy to do so. So first of all, in addition to being the superintendent, I am a mommy and a grandma. And my daughter is a director of early childhood in another district. So I am constantly being shown pre-K learning for little ones. And I have to say, I have seen things that have blown my mind, both in our district and elsewhere. There is such a strong connection between the teachers and the students that develops. And that when they do their synchronous learning, and when they do their learning, which is oftentimes feels like a recorded section of Sesame Street, these kids are so incredibly engaged. The other thing I want to say is that every kid is going to need individual supports. And one of the things that you can do with your youngest students is you can very quickly figure out what works for them, because every kid has a different style of learning. And some kids will be very comfortable picking things up quickly through music. Other kids will need to be visual learners, as Adrienne said in the beginning. Other kids will need movement. We can offer that for pre-literate little ones. Our kids can do this. All of you to this day will remember the alphabet song because that's what you learned when you were 2.5 years old. Our kids learn this. But if you think about it, coupled with read alouds, coupled with strong phonics instruction, which is a big push for me, with really good, strong-based phonics instruction that encourages our kids to understand that letters have names, but more importantly, letters are symbols of sounds, kind of like music. And it is remarkable what can be done with little ones, and they can be very highly engaged. And I'm thinking of your little one right now because you're talking about going into a preschool program. The more opportunities we give kids to do things and try things and create things and touch things, we don't have to have families have a lot of money. This isn't like you have to have a college degree. This isn't like you have to have all these supplies. You can do units of study, which is really how pre-K should work anyway. Units of study around things like water. One of the things we have, thank God, is water in our homes. And if you are in a home, then you should be pouring things, whether it's in the bathtub, whether it's when you're helping mommy with the dishes, and talking. The other thing I want to say is about English language learners, because I'm first generation. And my story is always about when I was in second grade, my mother wrote an absence note and the teacher said to me, I can't read your mother's handwriting. And I was 7 years old. I didn't know any better. I went home and said, the teacher can't read your handwriting. Well, that was the last absence note my mother ever wrote. From that point on, she made me write the absence notes and she would sign them. And so I am very cognizant about how parents often feel that they don't have the skills to support their children, when in fact, they have so much to offer. Our English language learners are not coming in at a deficit. They have life experience, they have language experience. And one of the things that we can do is honor that and build the connection. If you do anything about the work of Nani Lasso, and the work that she's done in advanced literacy, you understand that she talks about building the connections between the languages the kids already know and their experiences and the vocabulary they're learning. So the best example I can give you, we can actually do visually. If you say to a kid, this is an apple, and you say it in English and you don't hold up an apple, nobody knows what you're talking about. But we have the opportunity technologically to bring the world to our kids. So it's things like tours of the pyramids, tours of places they're studying, visuals, of course, and those are things that we need to bring in for our ELs, and that's what we're working to do. Thank you.
Again, relatedly, what is remote learning going to look like for D75 students, students with IEPs, students with other special learning needs, and experience shows that the remote delivery of services is impractical and doesn't really work well for many children. So how is the DOE going to ensure that students continue to receive the services that they need to thrive?
Yeah, I'll start and then I'll turn it over. So part of the reason why we have different models available for our District 75 schools is just an acknowledgement that there needs to be greater flexibility and an ability for principals to be able to program students differently. And we've heard from families, we've heard from a lot of our families in District 75 schools. We've also heard from our families who are parents of students with IEPs that are not in District 75 schools. And so there's the one piece of this that's like District 75 will have more flexibility and be able to have programming options that provide more opportunities for in-person learning for the students. But also we are looking at finding ways to make sure that we are delivering special education services in a very thoughtful way and doing professional development to make sure that we are in compliance with a lot of the rules and regulations around special education. And I'll just give you an example. We're thinking through ICT, we're thinking of through co-teaching models and what that looks like in remote platforms, and how you have the primary teacher and the special education teacher and how they work together within these platforms. And so we're starting to structure and provide more guidance and a blueprint for how that works. We're in the midst of developing policy on that to make sure that we are delivering the special education services the way that we would in person, remotely. So with that, I'll turn it over because Anita, you're really great at providing sort of, and this is how it looks on the ground. So I'm going to turn it over to you to give us a little bit of that. So I started by talking about my grandchildren, and I'm happy to continue doing so. One of my grandchildren, who's sitting several rooms away from me right now, is an 11-year-old boy who in our system, we're in Rockland County, but in our system, he would be in what would be a D75 class. He would be in an 8 to 1 to 1. He is a child who has autism, and he is very bright and very verbal. Social needs are important for him, and he's a friendly, happy kid, but he needs to have his instruction in a way that meets his needs. And as I said before, I talked about the ACES class. That's probably one of the best examples I can give you. So I will expand on it a little bit. This was a class where we had, I would say, 12 kids, maybe a little less, and because there were, I think, 9 on that day, but I think there were 12 in the actual class. And
2 of the kids used communication boards. The teachers, that lesson was so incredible because the kids were interacting with each other in a setting that was, you would think they were in a classroom. That did not happen overnight. On the first day of school, everything is going to be a learning experience. For some of our kids, they will be in school in D75 every day. Some of them will use that model because their class size is so incredibly small. They are in 6 to 1-to-1 classes. In other classes, they're in 8 to 1-to-1 classes. D75 is not usually what families talk about when they talk about special needs kids. What they talk about when they talk about special needs kids are kids who are in ICT classes and kids who may be in a 12 to 1-to-1. So those kinds of classes are in a traditional school. D75 classes are integrated into a traditional school, but they are really their own little school. And so it's going to look somewhat different. There are things that are being done. For example, this summer in summer school, they have given parents, some of the parents, the options to have their related services in person. And in other cases, they have given them the option, as they have had during remote learning, to do related services online. And some parents have really found that the kids love related services online. They're fine with that. My grandson is fine with that. And some parents, it's not as easy. No child in an ICT class is at the level that would require D75. Kids who are in ICT classes are kids who need additional supports. And I have to say that I watched a session with a teacher who worked on 1-to-1 with a little girl on a math lesson, and in 10 minutes taught that child something that I guarantee you, had she been in a non-remote setting where she had the distraction of other kids sitting with her and hearing sounds and things, would not have gone across that well. So in 10 minutes, he was able to draw from her. It's not like he gave it to her. He asked these incredible questions and got her to think, and she was able to focus in and concentrate. For some kids, that 1-to-1 away from everybody else is important, and we can do that remotely, and we can do that in person. I think in person sometimes is harder. I also feel as kids get older and they're in a situation where they may be pulled, sometimes they're embarrassed or uncomfortable. So that remote piece often helps kids like that. But we're going to have to see. But D75 is going to be a completely different structure because the kids are able to have smaller class size on a day-to-day basis, regardless of what happens.
Thank you for that very, very detailed answer. Really appreciate it. A question that we got over and over again is the DOE planning on using outdoor space and other alternative spaces such as libraries, recreation centers, cultural institution to maximize the amount of in-person instruction?
Yeah, we're certainly looking into outdoor space. We've gotten a lot of feedback from families and communities that there's a great desire to think through outdoor space, and we're thinking through that. Just want to sort of note some of the challenges with thinking through acquiring additional space. We are promoting health and safety. Our protocols are around making sure that our school spaces are safe. And part of that is making sure that there's daily cleanings of our school buildings. And so our custodians are going to be going in and making sure that every day all of our school buildings are completely sanitized with electrostatic cleansers. And so when you think through what that's going to mean for our custodial workforce, it's going to be a monumental sort of daily routine. When we think about acquiring additional spaces and what that would look like and the labor implications for it, it just becomes incredibly complicated. So I just want to sort of orient us. We're in a bit of a budget crisis. We are trying to focus on making sure that we are thinking through using the space that we have, being mindful about health and safety as we're thinking through those spaces. And then I know we are thinking about childcare and acquiring spaces for that purpose. But in terms of the DOE and where our focus is, it really is thinking through our current space and then how to utilize the outdoor spaces that we have access to.
Great. One question that I just saw proposed during the presentation is, in addition to the live instruction, what is happening when there isn't live instruction? I think for a lot of us, our experience in the spring was that something was uploaded onto Google Classroom, and the teacher would say, I'm available for office hours from X time. So the question is that going to be the model going forward, or when there's not when there's not in-person or live instruction, what are students going to be expected to be doing?
So I know Anita spoke a little bit about project-based learning. I think it's going to look different in terms of, like, at the end of the day, the teachers are going to be developing sort of their planning and their curriculum and how they're going to deploy and ensure that students are mastering the learning standards. And so I don't want to take away from that. I do know that we are working with our labor partners to increase and make sure that synchronous instruction is part of the method of instruction that we put forth in the fall. And so we've heard from families. We know that this is important. It's a learning that we've had, and we are going to make sure that we increase our opportunities for live instruction in the fall. I do think that there will be just, realistically, some asynchronous learning. And so I'm going to turn it over to Anita just to give an idea of like what that looks like and what ways the teachers will be thinking about that time.
So we have principals conferences. We've had principals conferences every week since we went remote. Prior to that, we used to meet monthly. The expectation for quality instruction doesn't change. The standards don't change because we're moving to remote or blended learning. The real term that you're talking to is blended learning. We have this mental picture in our head of school as being the time where the teacher is in front of the room teaching a lesson, and then the kids are doing some work, and then she's walking around the room checking it, and then they give homework, and the next day comes back and we check the homework and we go forward, and good teachers are able to figure out who got the homework right and who should I group and all of these things. That's actually a very traditional model, and that isn't what blended learning should look like. One of the things that we're talking about, and I'm going to get the acronym completely wrong, but I'm going to give it a shot, is this thing called SAMR. SAMR talks about the stages of transitioning to blended learning, where blended learning goes from using the computer the way you would use a blackboard to actually using technology as a way to teach learning. And the best example I can give you, and it's not the best example because it's the only one I can think of right now, is there is one thing to say to the kids, okay, it's time for writing. Everybody take out their writer's notebook, and we're going to write for the next 20 minutes. That is very traditional. You don't need technology for that. There may be some kids who are more comfortable on a computer, so they're typing on a computer, and that's the next level. Okay, so they're using the technology, but they're using it the way they would use brick and mortar, paper and pencil learning. If the children are in fact developing a blog or developing videos or developing a movie script and then building it into a movie script, and then filming it, that is the use of technology in a way that is very different than just writing in a notebook for writing. If you are given the opportunity to create a program that you then share with the students in your class. That is a difference. So when I think about asynchronous learning, I think about the time where that work is happening in small groups with the support of the teacher when it's needed, doing research, and then coming back together. It's very much an adult model that we have not inculcated into education because we're kind of used to that day-to-day teaching. And so it is my hope, and it is what we've been pushing and bringing in training on in District 15, that this is the kind of work that we will see going forward in the fall. And the other thing I'm going to let Karen talk about, which is the idea of priority standards, which is that there are things kids need to know, and then there are things that we've just taught because we've been teaching them for 300 years.
Yes, so thanks, Anita. So we are working, the Department of Education, the UFT, and CSA collaboratively in a curriculum planning committee to identify the priority learning standards that will be implemented for each grade in ELA, math, science, and social studies. So teachers will have that available, and the priority learning standards will help students finish any unfinished learning from the 1920 school year and be ready to accelerate learning towards meeting or exceeding the learning standards of the next grade that they will be in for the 2021 school year. So really looking forward to the priority learning standards being available to our teachers. And of course, at the borough office, we are ready to provide the professional learning first and foremost, so the teachers can understand the various blended learning options or models that are available to be implemented by teachers. So we are starting that work right now. Teachers were all introduced to the blended learning model on Chancellor's PD Day in June, but at the borough office, we are continuing to support our teachers throughout the summer and as the new school year starts up, so that they understand the models and they have the capacity to work with our students on a learning management system and in a remote learning setting.
Thank you very much. Shifting very quickly just to contingency planning. Ms. Austin, you referenced it at the very beginning, but what is the protocol if a teacher, administrator, staff member, child, or family member tests positive? And in addition, how is the DOE going to communicate these cases to the larger community so that people are aware of what's going on in the school or their classroom? It's a question that I think has been asked over and over.
Yeah, so we know top of mind for parents is like, what happens if there's a positive case? What happens if there's a suspected and then a confirmed positive COVID case? So we're working through those protocols and are hoping within the next couple of weeks to be able to announce a notification protocol and then closure protocols. But I will say we are going to have an isolation room in every school building, and that will be, if a student tests positive, where the student goes until they're picked up by a parent. So that I can tell you for certain. Every school will have an isolation room, and that is how we are going to sort of immediately, if a child is symptomatic, respond. But there will be other protocols in place, and so looking forward to the team announcing those in the upcoming weeks.
Thank you. I'm gonna ask Jess Byrne if there was who's been monitoring kind of the Q&A feature, if there's a question that she saw that she wants to ask from people during the meeting.
Yeah, I picked up a couple of them. Hold on. One of them was just a point of clarification. When we're talking about elementary school kids in these models, the models that were laid out at the beginning, does that also include pre-K?
For those, yes. For the pre-Ks that are a part of our community schools, yes.
Okay. And
And I want to just clarify, because there are pre-Ks that are part of our community schools, and then there are pre-Ks that are operated separately. And so there's a separate set of guidance that went out to community-based providers that's not a part of the program models announced here.
The other question that popped up a couple times is, will parents be able to see what the classrooms will look like? Will we get some kind of virtual tour of the classrooms to help prepare our students for going back into these classrooms when they're not going to look the same as they did when they left?
I think that that's a great suggestion. That's certainly something that we've given a lot of thought to. We are working with principals, and I know superintendents are working with principals to make sure that families are a part of this process. Already fully baked into the plan is the role of the school leadership team, which is inclusive of the PA-PTA president and other parent members of the community. And so that SLT is going to help give shape to some of what the incorporation of parents into the process looks like. But I will say, we're thinking about it. We're trying to figure out how to do that. We know that it's important to give parents confidence. We know that also we're thinking of health and safety, and it's not going to be the traditional school year where back to school night, everybody kind of comes into the school building and you get to see the environment where your kid's going to be sitting in their classroom. It's going to be different. And so we're thinking through how to make the experience as comfortable for parents and comforting to parents as possible, given that it's going to look different.
Okay.
There one more question, Jess?
Oh, you mean like my question, Doug?
If you want.
Okay, so my question is very specifically aimed at Adrienne Austin, because she is Deputy Chancellor of PACE. So both all across AD 44, which includes school districts 15 and 22, we have these wonderful community schools that are heavily dependent and generous with parent involvement. We have parent volunteers that are both in PA-PTAs, community education councils, as well as parents who show up to do things like lend a hand with translation, monitor school lunches, and clean the fish tank. So we're really wondering, on behalf of all of the parent volunteers in 15 and 22, what will our role look like going into the fall?
What I would love to do, because I can't say that I have an answer, I would love to talk with you offline about what your ideas are. We're in a space where we are rethinking, and this is a space rethinking our work. Certainly we've rethought how we do our work, and parent leaders have been rethinking how you all do your work. So all your meetings now are online. We go to the CEC virtual meetings, PTA-PTAs across the city are having virtual meetings. I would love to think through what volunteerism looks like for parents in the fall, because it's going to have to look different. We are basing all of our models on numbers and making sure that we're limiting the numbers of people in spaces to implement social distancing. And so it can't look like it looked before, where where it's pretty flexible and parents come in and they spend time. It has to look different. Would love to think through with you and maybe other parents. We can tag some other parents in as well to think through, what does that look like? What is our guidance on how to incorporate parent volunteers into the school community in a virtual setting? That's a great, thank you. Great idea. It's your idea, and I will follow up.
I want to thank you, Deputy Chancellor, Anita, District 15 Superintendent Anita Skop, Executive Superintendent Karen Watts, for joining us tonight. If I didn't get to one of your questions, there'll be other opportunities. I know that you are having these town halls pretty much every day, so I commend you for doing that. And I will hand it over to you for any concluding remarks before I conclude the meeting.
I'm going to be brief and let my colleagues do some closing remarks as well. I'm just grateful. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to come in front of you and directly engage with our parents. I know there's a lot of questions. We are here to provide as much clarity, as many answers as we can. Know that we are working around the clock to get clarity and to find answers. I'm super proud of all of our DOE workers, our teachers, our school food workers, our custodians, our principals, our superintendents, our executive superintendents, everyone. It isn't all hands on deck, everyone pitching in, working really around the clock in a way that I've never experienced before, to make sure that we're supporting our schools in this new environment, and we're reimagining the way that we work to support kids and support families. So with that, thank you. Going to turn it over to my colleagues, because I'm so grateful that they were here with me tonight. Super super helpful answers. Thank you, Superintendent Skop. Hands down to you. You are always like a legend. You come in and you blow us all out of the water with really great, helpful information to families and really granular experiences. And same to you, Executive Superintendent Watts. It's always a pleasure to have your comforting, sort of warm presence alongside me. So thank you. Turning it over to you, ladies.
Well, it's great for me to be as well this afternoon with you to hear your questions and concerns. Just know that we at the Borough Office ensure that the policies of the Department of Education are implemented in our schools. So, and we help inform some of the policy based on feedback we get from the field. So keep your questions coming. I know you sent a lot of questions to Superintendent Scott, and we ensure that the information gets to the Central Department of Education to inform the policies. I look forward to supporting the implementation over the next few months. I know schools have to make decisions regarding programming models, LMS, blended learning models, but that's what we're here for, to support schools in making those decisions along with the community. So looking forward to the work over the next few months and to a successful start to the 2021 school year. Over to you, Superintendent Scott.
So what I want to say is, it is my great pleasure to work with my colleagues who are amazing and to work with the staff at every school in District 15, the borough staff. We are a cohesive team, but more than that, we are connected to you, our parents, our families, in ways that boggle our minds. I could tell you lots of stories about how principals have supported families in food crises. I could tell you lots of stories about the way donations have expanded our food banks in our needier areas of our district. There have never been a finer group of families, of teachers, of staff, of school leaders, of borough leaders, and at the chancellor's level that are committed to the safety and success of our children. I am so honored to be your superintendent. I am so honored to work with you, and I want you to know that we are all here for you. We're all in this together. We literally are changing the history of our city and of education right now. And it could not happen if we were not the people that it is my privilege to work with every day. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about it, and thank you for the opportunity to let parents know how appreciated you are.
I want to thank all three of you for being here. I also want to thank Roberto Perez and Brandon Bloomfield from the DOE for helping us plan this tonight. I need to thank Tazeen Azad for providing Bangla interpretation, and Megan DeMarcus for providing Spanish language interpretation. And I need to thank the other parents and community leaders who helped me organize the event tonight: Kathy Park Price, Bonnie Schwerin, Nicole Hunt, Rehan Mehran, Jared Brilliant, Amy Brilliant, Jess Byrne, and Claire Tuck. I know that each of our panelists is working hard to get us ready for the fall, and I have the utmost confidence in our teachers. I think tonight demonstrated that we still have a long way to go before students, parents, and teachers get answers to their most pressing questions. And if remote learning is going to be successful, and I know that we all share an interest, the same interest in making sure it's successful, it's essential that the DOE both listen to the voices of students, parents, and teachers and provide clear and straightforward communications about what we can expect going forward, and do that as soon as possible. So I want to thank you all again to our panelists for an amazing session, and thank you everybody for being here.
Thank you.